Exodus 27 to 31. We're introduced during this portion of our reading to a concept that's very common in the ancient world. It's not explicitly taught in the Bible, but again, it's assumed. So we need to discuss it here. Remember back in Exodus 3 that Moses confronts this burning bush. He's told to take off his sandals because he is on, quote, holy ground. Well, this is the concept, and again, it's very prevalent in the ancient world. The concept of sacred space, and you can hear in this phrase the idea that when a person was presumed to be in the presence or even the proximity of a divine being, it was a dangerous thing. And this is going to be part of the biblical story beforehand, like Exodus 3. Exodus 19, the people were at the base of Mount Sinai and told not to touch it lest they die. But it's also part of our story today, because what happens is Israel basically institutionalizes through the building of a tabernacle the idea of sacred space. Remember that we'll see this later. The Ark of the Covenant is going to be placed in this back room called the Holy of Holies, or Most Holy Place. And the idea is that as a person would approach where Yahweh lived, he was assumed to live actually there in that back room. The closer you got, the more holy, consecrated, or sanctified you needed to be. We'll see that the high priest only goes back into this room once a year. So what we had today in our reading was a lot of discussion about the altar and the priesthood and the furniture inside this building. And how it functioned in a holy way and part of this ritualistic world of Israel. Now, everything I've said to this point is common in other religions of this time period. Other religions had tabernacles, temples, arks, altars, priests, and so forth. So our consideration is, as we read this text, what made it different? How is this text making Israel and Yahweh a different kind of religion compared to the rest of the world? And I think what we find, in fact, we can even count the number of times it's used. I count 28 times the phrase "to Yahweh" or "before Yahweh" is used. And that is a very important idea, because what's going to be happening, and you can look ahead to Leviticus 17 for this, the first 7 verses, where it talks about the issue of Israel doing this is not, to God, it's not his concern that they would get all the pieces right. I know it sounds that way when you read it. There's so much information that it almost has this semi-hypnotic effect that God is really, concerned about the intricacies of blood and oil and water and all that sort of thing. But again, 28 times you have this phrase of bringing this to Yahweh. In Leviticus 17, the challenge that God is giving them is, you cannot do this anywhere but at the door of his house. You must bring it to the door of the tabernacle. Why? Because otherwise, Leviticus 17:7, you will be doing it to demons. And it uses the actual word demon in Leviticus 17:7. And we'll talk about it when we get there. What is a demon in Hebrew terms? It's another god, as you could guess. And so again, here's the point that I want to catch out of this very difficult reading we had for today. We're in the same story. We're not changing the story to have a god get all concerned about paraphernalia of ritual. We're having God give the same recommendation throughout the story, that when you go through this process of cleansing yourself as you confront sacred space, be sure that you do it at the right place, lest you worship the wrong God.